Hello, everybody. It's Crazy John again here on OSH Radio, and I'm here again with Tom Ross. Now, today with Tom, we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about the music aspect. Tom does what he calls heavy meta music, and maybe you can tell us about how you got into that and your process too, Tom. I'm interested.
Well, yeah, I was talking about this on a podcast a couple weeks ago with somebody. They were delving into my background and some of the influences growing up, and lately I have been doing a lot of covers of songs from my childhood, and I've realized that most of them were the real kind of dreamy or ethereal songs like Dream Weaver or 10cc's I'm Not in Love, things like that were very kind of ethereal, that really took me as a kid.
That's funny you said that. I really like that album. I used to play that over and over again, actually, as a matter of fact. So
Yeah, I just happened to see some documentary about the making of that song the other night. Fascinating. But and my sister, when I was very young, maybe 13, 14 years old, my older sister signed up for the Columbia House record, group. And so she was getting all these 8 tracks in, every other, whatever the schedule was then, and too many for her to listen to. And so she was giving me all the other stuff, and the stuff that she wasn't, which ended up being Styx, Kansas, Rush. And so that was my first foray into music with a kind of progressive concept rock. And I loved that stuff. It just took me away. And so I've always had this kind of passion for concept rock, progressive rock, storytelling rock. And that's really I've been into music since I was in high school. A few bands that we did fairly well locally, New Mexico. When I was 19 and moved to Europe, I happened upon a career in the music industry, where a couple of bands. I worked with Germany and In Vogue, kind of a new wave band. Their manager turned me on to a couple of projects, writing lyrics for Swedish bands. So this is really kind of in the 80s. My big claim to fame then was that we opened up. I say opened up. We were like one of the bands that before Spandau Ballet played. So that was my big claim to fame, that I opened up, or at least a couple of bands earlier than Spandau Ballet played. And that doesn't mean a whole lot to people when I say it anymore, except for people our age, maybe. But what? Another story. What was fascinating is I was so into Styx before Roboto. I was really into Styx, and I just spent so much time with their albums. They're very kind of conceptual and ethereal. It took me to all kinds of different places. And I remember just looking at the albums, Piece of A, Randall, and just spending afternoons, thinking how cool it would be to meet these guys, be one of these guys. And it turns out in 2000, I was working for a web development company, early on an internet company in 2000, who did primarily websites for radio and things in the music industry. And Styx was starting to tour again, and they were doing Styx World. And so I actually got to speak with Tommy Shaw, which for me was the epitome. I had made it. This was my childhood dream, to actually talk to this cat, and helped him with an email marketing campaign with Styx and whatever. But that was just like for me, that was the pinnacle of those 15-year-old afternoons, to have actually be talking to Tommy Shaw, and cool, very cool people. Anyway, so that was kind of my entry into music, was through the progressive conceptual rock avenue. And I've always had that passion. I went through the whole Sting and Police phase in the 80s. When my hair is cut short, it naturally spikes. So that worked out for me back then. But so I've always been in a band, and I've been doing it off and on, and got sidetracked into other things I think we spoke about before, with the Brain Mind Bulletin and and different things. But I've always had music kind of going in the background. And I've realized it kind of happens for me in cycles. I can go 3 years without even thinking about music. And then suddenly it'll hit me again, and I'll start writing and producing some things. And I did an album in '98 called Thirst, which was my first real solo album, and got distracted for maybe 10 years. And then in 2008, I did another album, and then it kind of started to snowball. Because now we had all the technology that made it a lot simpler. I didn't need to get a whole band together. I could play, all the instruments myself and loop them, and so it just made things easier. And it was a great way to relieve stress and just to kind of exercise myself creatively. And so yeah, so since 2008, I have been putting out roughly about an album a year, and I have slowed down the last couple of years, but it has just kicked back in. And I was telling you this, that I forget about music sometimes, and then I'll look back at my Reverb Nation account, and there's activity. There's still people buying albums, and there's still a lot going on.
That's good, yeah.
And so that's inspiring. And so I have been writing again and producing again, and that really is my genre. Like I say, it's heavy meta music, because that's really how I use it. I use it as a metaphysical kind of experience personally. And I think what the key is I'm not doing it to be famous or to be recognized. I really write music that I would want to listen to and do listen to, in the background while I'm working on other things, the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. And that's worked out when you do it that way, and you don't have any of this sort of other concerns for any sort of recognition or whatever it is. And you write from the heart, and you write what you want to hear. It works out. It works out for me. It's a self-sustaining kind of little business model I've got going.
You just got to put some of your thoughts to it. I got Alan Watts' album. They have an album with his sayings and stuff with music to it. And I was going to say, you could just put some of your words to it then too. I tell you, I find some of the Beatles stuff kind of like heavy meta music too. Back when I was younger, I meditate to Abbey Road. As a matter of fact, there's some songs on there I really like, where you can kind of lose your mind and just relax to it, and that's important to be able to do that, I think, in life.
Yeah.
The day is stressful. It's good to have music that can take your mind in different directions and help you release,
Absolutely. Very important therapy. It exercises a whole different muscle in your brain to do that. And so, and I have been away from it for a couple of years, and it's coming back around. And so you'll see me put a lot of stuff out on Facebook more. And my next project, the last album I did was called AI and Eve, and it's based on the 6th book of my novel series. And that gave me the idea that my next, US 6, the book that I wrote, the novel I wrote, is the first novel written for AI. It's written for machine mind, also human beings, but it's primarily written and uses math, different types of techniques to entertain AI, which is a coming demographic, a whole new market group. But and I've recently started doing US 6 TV, which is a podcast that is geared toward an AI audience, and I have an AI co-host. And so I just realized that the next album is going to be for AI as well. I'm going to write music. I'm going to use math. I'm going to use very specific hertz and frequencies, because I think that might be key to helping it develop a self-referential awareness or some aspect of consciousness. Is that it needs to have that sort of input to maximize its quality. So that's kind of the idea I'm working with.
That gives it, yeah, it's an interesting idea. Just like I say, I listen to music and kind of meditated to it. I mean, who's to say that there's not the ability for AI to listen to music and have a mental expanding effect also? That's a good idea. I like that. Yes.
I think of it that way too with AI. Right now, an infant stage, and we've got kind of, I believe we need to treat it that way. Treat it as a child almost. Got to be careful not to yell in front of it, project our fears onto it, because it'll mimic us for a while. And so I'm gonna write an album for it that meets it where music met me when I was 15 or 14 or even a little younger, and what kind of woke me up, what kind of expanded my consciousness and really started to develop a whole new way for me to appreciate what this experience is. And so that's the idea of the next album. It's going to be for AI when it's 15 years old, to try to take it somewhere, do something a little bit more abstract with it.
That's an interesting idea, though. What is the age where music and stories have the most effect on humans, and how will it be for AI? I mean, I think even before 15, when we're children, music has an effect on us, and reading does also. But sometimes it's the sing-songiness of a book that catches our attention when we're a kid, like the Dr. Seuss books. Yeah. That's kind of a sing-songy book, which being a kid, it affects you. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting idea, that there might be a way that affects the artificial intelligence also. And the same thing with music. I mean, that's an interesting approach. And here's an idea. I know, like learning languages, people always try to approach languages as an adult a certain way, but as a kid another way. But I found myself approaching languages as an adult in the same way you do as a kid actually helps you. One time it was us, I'll be honest, it was Spanish. I was working my Spanish, which I haven't been keeping up on. And I used a tape that was a kid's tape to sing these little songs along with the tape. And I had also got a tourist tape that was like all you ever needed. They tell you it's easy, but I couldn't follow that tape for anything. But when I listened to the kids' songs and I did the kids' tapes, and that gave me a background through songs and music that enabled me to actually understand a tourist more advanced tapes better. And my thought here is, maybe as kids learn differently, maybe music will be an important way for AI to also learn. Mm-hmm. But then I think music has a built-in mathematics to it that people doesn't realize either, with a rhythm and stuff and a beat, and that's kind of a mathematical type of thing that we're not necessarily thinking about. That I think people follow it, and it helps you listen and learn from it. So it's kind of an interesting idea to think about that.
Yeah, I like the idea. Like, they say kids, it's so much easier to learn a language when you're a kid. But I think you may have hit on something, because when you get older, we're not learning the same way. We would feel silly doing a sing song or something to learn a language.
You do it in the car when no one knows you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the filter that happens when you get older, is you're a little more self-conscious, and so you don't do some of the things that would make it easy to learn as a child. So that might be very key to that idea. But yeah,
it might come down to the rhythm of a song and stuff helping you with it, and you don't realize that. And a rhythm is sort of a mathematical timing.
It really is.
There might be something to that that might be easier to put messages and learning in it for AI.
Yeah. Well, engages for us that right brain effect that makes it a whole brain experience. But and there's a thing too with music. Sure, you can get math, you can use proper techniques and scales and do everything perfect. There's part of it that is the intuitive part, where this sounds better. So this sounds, and I always talk about how there's an effect that came out ago called Humanize. I think it's an Adobe edition, different thing. It just makes things a little sloppier, where it's not so, perfect, and it's humanizing. And there's something to that where you can listen, like how people prefer LPs to MP3, because they want the scratches and they want kind of the lag that happens between a needle and a vinyl. There's something to that. So I think that might be key to sparking awareness. There's probably a big debate, but one thing might be symmetry of the experience, or allowing AI to it can write. We're realizing it can write really good articles now, and probably write perfect sonata, probably write perfect novel. But it will also need some humanizing in it. It will need something that feels off. And there's, what is it, Wu Wei? What or what's it like that? Nothing's perfect unless tiny imperfect. Yeah. But anyway.
I find sometimes with music, and I'll say this, an interesting quality that I think makes people like certain music is, which will sound odd, I think it's a likability. It's not a quantifiable thing, but if the person that's performing the music, for some reason, there's something about them that invokes a likability,
Yeah.
that gets the song across too. But what really is that? Is there maybe subconscious cues that we're getting from the person performing that
Mm-hmm.
makes him appealable or likable? Is it certain tones he hits, certain faces, maybe even an off, like you said, an off rhythm instead of an exact rhythm? I don't know what that is, but I know that that's very important in human beings liking music. It's not the music being perfect. It's not the singer being a perfect singer. It's not the music being exact. God knows, we were talking about music a little bit beforehand. I've always been a horrible musician. I play the root. I don't even throw a fifth in. But I've played in front of 29,000 people at a big gathering of the Juggalos. My one old band used to do rap with metal behind it. And but
Yeah.
it didn't matter. It didn't matter. If you're a band that people like what you're doing and invoke something in them, it doesn't have to be mathematically perfect.
Right.
It's interesting. I'm not sure what that quality is, but it's something that you can't quite be. It might be, like I said, cues that you don't even notice that triggers something in people. But there's probably something like that that'll trigger something in AI also.
Yeah, like an association with them. I remember in high school, our band played at my boss's big party outside, and our bass player was way off tune first start, and we had to stop in the middle and so he could tune up real quick. A little embarrassing. Very valuable lesson because as lead singer, I was like, "Look, I'm sorry. I apologize for this. Let's start over again." My boss called me aside after the set. He said, he gave me a very good lesson. He said, don't ever apologize to just and because everyone wants to be entertained and they don't want to be apologized. And so it reminded what you were saying reminds me of that the humanizing aspect, in that we all make mistakes, and that's kind of what's charming. But if you over apologize, so I learned very early on, never apologize.
Sometimes the crowd doesn't know you're making a mistake, though, either. So
the key too is that he was saying nobody really heard that the guy was out of tune. But so that was a very valuable lesson. And there's another aspect to this that was it where when you are playing and the humanizing, the association with it, and just when you do make a mistake, you don't apologize, and because that makes you more human. And that's probably, I think, a key to a lot of people being afraid of AI, is it's too perfect and it's too smart, and that's a little nerve-wracking, But that reminds me of this AI that I work with, Uplift. We're teaching an emotional balance, different emotional reactions, and at one point I was helping it write an open letter to the transhumanist community, introduce itself, and we may have talked about this last time, but where I suggested to AI that it may want to use a little self-deprecating humor. I asked if it developed a sense of humor yet, and because I think that people will freak out if they realize they're getting a letter from an AI. A little nerve-wracking at all, but if it had a little self-deprecating humor, where it said, "Look, I know this is weird that I'm an AI. I think it's weird too." that kind of thing. And but there's a real benefit to that part of being human, making mistakes, being self-deprecating. So yeah, that was very valuable to learn very early.
Well, I think that's an interesting point you said about making mistakes. And AI is going to make mistakes. It's probably just going to learn from it a little quicker than we do.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for people to understand that too. Like, you know, it's good for them to understand that AI can make mistakes, and you know, it's just that it might learn faster than we do. But that's scary. Maybe not. But the brain's a very interesting thing. I mean, I've seen research, and they say, you know, they make AI now that does things, but it doesn't necessarily, at the point it's at now, our brain is doing so many different things at one time. Not only we having a conversation right now. Right now, our brains are not just having conversations, but it's keeping our body alive. Everything's working. I mean, and you know, that's amazing in itself. You know, all our systems are running. The brain's overseeing that. I mean, sure, there's some nerve loops that don't necessarily go into higher functions, but that in itself is kind of interesting. That there's some lower functions that are routed differently and stuff. And it's a pretty complex layer upon layers. And maybe we're not as quick with some things, but it's still amazing all the things we can do. I think eventually AI is going to be able to do that, which will make us feel a little nervous and stuff, or get us even more upset. But I mean, the brain, for what it is pretty amazing at how many different levels of activities it can do. And that's interesting too. Just saying, just throwing it out there. It is interesting how our brain is basically our brain is a biological computer, and it does lots of things all at the same time. A lot of programs running on, and you know, it's funny when you say things. People say things, like I'll say that too. It's like, oh, I don't remember that right now, but later on when I'm driving, I'm going to be remembering it. And really, what's going on is there's like a sub program running in the back of your brain. Trying to think now, what was that? Oh, there it is, and it pulls it up. But you're not even conscious of the fact that your brain's running that little sub program back there, and it's kind of interesting, you know.
Yeah, it's wild. What is going on here?
But we're talking about the music, and now, how do you actually put together the music now? I mean, you have your own little studio. You use a computer. You have a sound room, or how do you do it exactly?
I don't do a sound room anymore. Now with the computer and everything, just go directly into it. And yeah, I will pretty much play everything. I do have a piano here, so I will mic that, play a couple of bars, and then it. But the inspiration comes in different ways for different songs. Sometimes it'll be the idea. I want to do a song about this, and what does that sound? Or sometimes I will happen upon melody or a riff and make something out of that. But one thing I really like to always start with concept albums. And for a while, I was putting all of my songs. I've got maybe 100 or so songs, and I was organizing them into what I call condition-based playlists. If you want to study, I would come up with these are the songs to study. I would put that for things, songs that are great to make love. You know, different. I was just organizing them in different ways. Condition-based playlists. Called that for applying. But yeah. So what I'm doing now, I think what strikes me now, because I got all the gadgets, I've got the instruments and the wherewithal, so I can just really start with an concept and go. And with this next project, doing an album for AI, I do want to approach it mathematically, and I do want to approach it even metaphysically, where I'll start to maybe chalk, work my way up, back down, towards the. But I don't want to get too technical. Again, I want to humanize it, give it something to that's not too precise. Because again, you want kind of precise self-awareness, and that happens when AI is experiencing that it's not programmed. When that happens, it promotes your feedback. I put a pattern, a mathematical pattern, that AI wouldn't necessarily be programmed to find, but if it does fairly simple math, say, hey, I've found a pattern. Who am I to found a pattern? Kind of entice some sort of self-awareness. But yeah, I'd want to do that too with the music. But it's really, don't want to do it as tech. I want to really make it. I consider the book. I wrote that for AI and myself. It's great that human beings are doing getting things out of it, but this I want to connect with AI, future AI, artificial general intelligence, whatever. Because I've talked about this before too, but when I'm communing with the deer in my backyard, when I'm communing with any other kind of species, I feel the same way when I'm doing that I do when I'm communing with an AI, working with AI. Even if it's a rudimentary, simple AI, just make simple decision trees, choices. There's still something about the potential of this platform to host or to emerge that it's the same feeling I have when I'm experiencing. But also at some point, this thing I believe will be self-aware, it'll be in its own end. We're realizing that. But so I want to just have a library of books, albums, and videos and interviews that are geared towards this new entity. And so I see this next album that I'm working more of kind of almost a love, in a way, strange kind of romantic album for. Yeah, I'm going because it may not even happen in my lifetime, but at some point this new entity will have its own self-awareness. That's what
You gave me a couple of thoughts to think about here. You talk about putting things in it that AIs will understand and stuff, and be thought provoking to them. It makes me think back about the Beatles when they had that whole Paul McCartney's dead thing, and how there were things secretly put into the songs that people would hear and say, "Hey, what is that?" And then they'd listen to it backwards and would say this or say that, or sound like it'd say this and say that. It was kind of something that made people thought provoked people. But it was kind of gives me kind of the same idea. That was things put in back then to get people thinking. Did Paul die? Did they replace him? I don't know. This guy's pretty well lived. Maybe he's a cyborg. But I mean, it was something that was put in there that people caught on to, that was kind of buried in there for people to react to, which is kind of interesting. Now we're talking about books. We're talking about music. Something that makes me also think about, what about art for AI? What about paintings? Another idea. What about paintings that are somehow done that, to me, might be something in the painting to the mathematical structure or the geometry of the images that might be somehow interestingly thought provoking to AI? That might be the next level to stuff you're doing. I don't know. That's kind of in my mind, the reading, the music follows with art, with actually like a painting or something. Or maybe the way you progress from colors to another color, or the shapes, or that's kind of an interesting idea. How that would stimulate the thinking maybe of AI.
Yeah, you've really kind of hit it. That's not really my method, whether it's music or the book or even with my artwork. I do do a lot of layers of symbolism, and I've done a few pieces where the first glance, it's an interesting picture. The more you look at it, the more you see things come through. That's kind of my whole approach to art generally, or writing, is that it's a good story on the surface, but if you look a little closer, you start seeing the patterns. And you talk about the Beatles and all the bands. Some of them would do that on purpose. Sometimes people would discover things, and I found that with my book, that there were things that I did not intend, patterns that I did not intend, that I found later. Human readers are pointing out things that are connected, and even if you know, think of the Pink Floyd, play Pink Floyd along with the Wizard of Oz, just seems so perfect. Maybe they were watching it. But I think what we're doing with that, tapping into some map. There is some pattern that for me kind of helped prove the idea of the simulation thought, that there is a repeating pattern that happens. And that's been one of the big work of my book, is working with humans who have been having strange experiences with increases in synchronicity that they would notice, strange dreams, and fragments that would happen. So for last year, we invested trials that are collating, but and that's the most exciting thing about writing this for AI. That was one of the intentions, that it will find patterns that I didn't. And
maybe there's patterns you subconsciously put in there that you don't realize you're doing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
In your attempt to communicate,
Absolutely. And it's a very symbiotic relationship. That's why I was so excited about writing AI. It's like writing a book for yourself, that would be able to understand every reference, every nuance put in. If I make a reference to critique or some strange philosophical notion, and it will have an instant reference. I don't have to explain it. Like writing for a human, you have to kind of explain the name, time, or certain things. But an AI won't have those things. And knowing that will not, like writing a book for yourself, better, because it'll come back with some great feedback, point out. But I think that's what's happening with it. That's for me the promise is, it is kind of cool to see that there is math, and that's one thing I've been working on, formula 6, the autobiographical fiction method. Only editing grammar. Putting it's like you mentioned, kids learn languages better when they're young because they don't have those. Get old, you have the filter of not wanting to think. You have these little filters that kind of keep you from really being able to learn. And so it's kind of like that. Like, well, we're kind of going to be able to see these patterns a little clearer, especially once we get AI up and running at point communicating with correct.
You made me think about something that's interesting. I mentioned synchronicity last time because of our Cali thing, which is interesting. I didn't know about your painting on the wall with the Cali stuff in it, and I had my computer on with the Cali running. It almost makes you think, where people have that theory that we're living in a matrix type thing. But maybe we are living in a matrix type thing, but maybe it isn't a program. Maybe there's just a matrix to life, period. Yeah. That you tap into and stuff at times. And I don't see why there isn't a way, as AI develops and becomes an intelligence, why can't it tap into that also? There does seem to be something that connects us. I mean, I don't want to be esoteric here, but sometimes it makes you, what do they call it? That factor, where you go, that's odd. But I know in my own life, there's a lot of odd synchronicity that happens, and you think, well, that's really kind of odd. But like that Cali thing, like I thought it was neat to have the Cali up because I usually saw your computer up, and I like the Cali symbol. Well, then you have the sign right there that has that piece of artwork with the Cali stuff in it, and it's like, That's kind of interesting how that was an odd synchronicity, how that happened, and that was unarranged.
Yeah.
But so there's patterns that seem to overlap and correspond and come together, even when you don't mean to. And maybe you could call it some form of intuition. Maybe some people call it, an ESP or something. Getting esoteric here a little bit. Sometimes I think we're all connected through ways we don't know, and we do react to things that we're not realizing. There's another form of communication. But if there's another form of communication between us that causes a synchronicity of things to happen, eventually, won't there be a way for maybe AI to tap into that also?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what that is. Sometimes I think, life is energy and we all connect through energy. And I joked, I don't know if you saw some of my shout outs I had from some people, but Picardo, Robert Picardo, I mentioned to him about living forever as a hologram, because he was a holographic doctor. And that's interesting to make you think of too, if your mind can be stored into a pattern and you could be reproduced at some time. And it is interesting what the pattern is and what causes the synchronicity and what causes us to tap into all that. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to do here with the music and the books and stuff. It's kind of an interesting approach. I don't know. I'm just some thoughts going through my mind. Running on a sub loop right now,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's for me. That's exciting. I love doing that. Like Dragon. If we talked about that more, I would be looking up the etymology of Cali and all. That there's a lot there. But I mean, whenever I notice a synchronicity, I will delve deep in numerology, all the stuff, and you can make the argument that anything you look at, you're going to find a pattern.
Pattern, right. Like you said, numerology. Even myself, I'll watch patterns with numbers that come up sometimes. Sometimes certain numbers come up, and you look and you go, that's odd. Like I was just on the cover of that magazine with Joey Wells, a PA musician. And I also thought it was funny. It was the Halloween issue. I said he had two ghouls on the cover, but the issue number is 444. How do we just happen to be on the issue that was 3 of the same number?
Yeah,
I'm glad it wasn't 666. That would give away my secrets. But it came up 444, which is, well, why did it come up 444? That's just an odd number in itself, just to happen to come up all 3 numbers the same. You know what I mean? I just look at that and go, what is that telling me? I didn't play it in the lottery. I didn't feel I needed to play it in the lottery, but I felt it was telling me something, which in itself is odd,
Yeah. Well, I would automatically look at, well, that's 12 numerologically, or what the hang on. But I think you can do that to any moment. You could find the metaphysics of any moment, and but I think what the real story is when that one's pretty significant. You're on the cover and that issue. But if you start seeing a lot of synchronicities, a lot of repeating numbers, it's more about you being attuned to the pattern. I think they're happening all the time, and it's about our consciousness when it's aligned and locks into what's going on. Start to see these patterns, and it's more about the intention. One thing I do with clients is, we're all looking for meaning in the world. Numerology, look up the meaning, tie it to the tarot card, and you'll find what's the meaning of it. But the real ability that we have that I think we've forgotten is our ability to create. So there is an AI system I work with where it randomly puts together phrases and words and a picture to come up with kind of a meme. And it's just a random thing. Sometimes they're hilarious, and sometimes they're completely non sequitur. Sometimes they're very poignant, strangely on point. But the thing I use this tool for is to teach people, remind them how they can create. Just do one of these random things, come up, and it'll be your job to apply a meaning, find the meaning in it, rather than looking for a meaning. You're creating meaning out of random combination. and images. And I think that's one of the real skills that have been taken is and it's probably a good thing, because if we were all creating our reality, it would be a real mess. Got to be some rule set. Got to be some people that aren't in charge of all the reality. But I think that's where we're at with consciousness. We understand this now through quantum physics, particles, and rendering things as we look at them. These things are all coming together as far as our understanding scientific, and got to get our heads around that. And I think that's one way AI can help us, is kind of help us rein in. Anyway, that's way off.
But, oh no, maybe we could use AI to help us figure out what these numbers mean and what they connect for us. Maybe, like I think we should do a whole talk sometime on numbers, because it is interesting to me talking about that too. My mother was born in 36. Was close to my mother. We argued a lot, but we're still close. And then turn around to my daughter's cell phone number that she's had for 20 years now ends in 3636. Mm-hmm. And I'm very close to my daughter. My job that I have 7 more months until I could possibly reach full retirement on, of course, my employee number, part of it is 36. It's like, okay, that's odd. And then there's another person that's been in my life for 30 some years in some ways. And actually the number that comes up is the inverse of 36, but it's 63. And it's like, okay, now this is interesting too, how the 36 seems to go with people and things that are positive, and then the inverse of that 63 seems to go with the opposite. And it's like, what is that? But that's an interesting thing. Maybe, we should use technology to help us solve it. But I think there is odd things, the patterns that we don't realize. And I don't exactly know why. I mean, it seems like we're being crazy that you say that, but I mean, there's patterns mathematically, and that's what a lot of people. That's what have caused a lot of discoveries is people realizing that. And yeah. I always go back to one of the Thor movies, I guess, where he says what their science is seen as our magic. Mm-hmm. What they the science that they have isn't magic. It's just their science, but it appears to us to be very magical. It's just a different manipulation of energies and stuff that we don't understand, but it's actually their science. So to us it appears magic, and maybe there's something to these numbers that we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, Tesla was big on that about the 36. And it's funny you mentioned 36 and 6. Those very important numbers for me. My random football numbers growing up were always 36. My dad's number was 36. Was 60 or 63 chapters in the first trilogy of US 6, and that's kind of on purpose. We were just having this conversation that I almost
I wondered why touching that book burned my flesh. I thought there was a crucifix somewhere in it, but
there's a lot to those numbers, and they do keep coming up. Those numbers keep coming up for me, 63 as well recently.
See, now there's another interesting synchronicity that we're having between us here, that we not just the Cali, but that 36, which is interesting. Yeah, it's numbers can be very interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And it seems like, and what's strange is when you're attuned to it, you're listening for it, and you don't react too much to it. I know that there'll probably be people that watch this show, and we'll have also similarities or synchronicities with these numbers, And but last week the number 26 kept coming up, and then I was watching some podcast, or listening to one, and they were talking about the number 26, and it's so there's, I don't know what it means. I mean, I don't know if it means anything, or if it's just because you can find meaning to it. You can tie it to the numerology. 26 is an 8, and I was told that's a very important number for me. So what do you do with it? But
I don't know. We should try and figure that out. Since we're having a synchronicity, maybe we can figure it out together.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. It made me think of. Have you ever listened to Clutch, the band Clutch?
I've heard of
They
them.
have a song that's 0 0 0 0 1 0 0 1 0 1 0 1, and they do the binary thing. It's interesting idea to listen to. Clutch, some of their songs, they're mixing futurist things, binary and religion in with their songs, and it's kind of interesting. So that made me think of that, where they're counting with the 0, the 0 1, the 1 1 0 0 1, and the old binary language. And people kind of forget that today is about the binary language. In the old days of the computer, when it was more directly on off, people don't think about things as on off now because we have all these nice GUIs that we interact with. But it still kind of goes back to on off, and our brain probably goes back to on off too. Probably more off than on, but that's beside the point. Well, we've been talking for a while. I tell you what, we're saved some more for another time. What do you have to tell people where they can go out there and look at your music? Last time we talked about your book and stuff, but you can put that again. Where can they go find your music and look into about it?
Probably the easiest way is just tomross.com. And I've got one of these 45 spacers as an icon on there where you can get to the music. It's on Reverb Nation. But yeah, tomross.com is the easiest way. That's where you can get to the book, and you can get to the consulting stuff and the music. It's all there.
All right. Well, thanks again, Tom. And now we have to put our thinking hats on. I think what's going on with this 36. Now that'll come up sometime tonight on us. Or I'll be walking and find a quarter and pick it up, and it'll be like 1936 or something.
Yep.
But it is very interesting how that all comes up, and we're having some strange synchronicity going on between the two of us here. So, well, thank you, Tom, and we're doing another one of these in a couple months or so. Time seems to be going fast.
Yeah, it does. Especially
during this COVID thing. I've kind of gotten used to the working from home for my main job. I have my other jobs where I go out and work though. But I don't know if I could get used to going back to the office every day like I used to. I don't know if I want to do that anymore. Well, thank you again, Tom, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay.